Rain fell upon the travelers as they passed between the trees. The deluge had begun during early morning, coming from the south. It had not ceased, and as the hours dragged on, it weighed them down more and more. They had entered Elthar Forest, in hope to lose the soldiers who hunted them. Taela had spotted them when she had scouted in her falcon form. Elthar was a large forest that stretched from the Theldic hills all the way south to Daerol. Over the centuries it had thickened, reclaiming much farmland. Many ruins of old were scattered throughout it. They walked in silence, and Taela felt miserable. Her feet ached, and water had seeped into her boots. They had walked for hours without rest, pushed on by Nelren. Around midday the rain ceased, and Iliva came out from behind the dark clouds. Her light warmed, and the world was basked in her glory. They stopped beneath the branches of 3 gnarled spruces. The ground beneath them was drier. Thaelen and Taela sat themselves upon a large, flat stone. Anaea did the same, but Nelren, after having put down his packing, remained standing.
"All my clothes are drenched,"
Anaea said.
"We'll need a fire if we are going to dry some clothes,"
Nelren said. He then looked over to Thaelen and Taela.
"Make yourself useful and help us get some firewood."
Thaelen rose from the stone, but Taela remained seated.
"I'm going to rest a little. My feet ache,"
she said.
"We all have aching feet. The faster you do your part, the faster you can rest." "And who put you in charge?"
she asked angrily.
"It was me and Thaelen that was sent out on this mission. And without us, he would now be in Henith's care. We gave up our lives to break him out, and may perhaps never return to our home again. So perhaps you could thank us by helping to gather some firewood." "It was the least you could do, seeing how it was you that got him captured in the first place." "Taela,"
Thaelen began.
"Maybe we should just—" "Well, excuse me, Lady Arinda, but I was just doing my job," Nelren said. "You see, not all of us have grown up having everything delivered on a silver platter."
Taela rose to her feet, a fury alight in her eyes. A fire flickered between her fingers. Nelren grabbed at his sword hilt. Thaelen stepped in between them.
"Let's just calm down. We are all tired and drenched. We don't need to make a scene out of it."
"Yeah," Nelren said.
"Calm down, Lady Arinda, before you do something you'll regret."
Taela's fury deepened,
and for a moment it seemed like she would attack him.
But instead, she said through gritted teeth,
I am going to take a short flight to get away from this idiot.
She then promptly shifted her form and flew away. Nelren grunted, yet said nothing. Thaelen sighed.
Is she always like that?
Anaea asked.
She is very determined.
Thaelen answered. Taela returned after a full hour, but she remained mostly silent. They remained there for a while, waiting for the clothes to dry. They were far from the beaten paths of the roads, deep within the forest, so the danger of discovery was minimal. Yet they still kept watch, and spoke only silently and briefly. Once their clothes were dry, they smothered the fire, dumping earth onto it, and took off again. They walked for some hours more, only stopping when Eleva had reached well into the western sky. They made camp again, this time next to an old, seemingly man-raised stone. Anaea gazed at it for a time, then said,
This stone, there's something off about it. It's just a moss-covered stone, sister.
Nelren said.
That may be so, but it just feels wrong somehow.
She responded, but did not press the matter further. Nelren, Thaelen and Anaea went out to look for firewood, whilst Taela took flight and scouted the area. A compromise, since she didn't want to gather firewood. She was first to return. When the others came back, they began to make a fire. Nelren knelt before it and brought out the flint and steel. But before he could use it, Taela set the tinder alight with magic. Nelren flinched back, then scowled at her. The fire cracked and popped as it spread from the tinder to the wood. They ate some of their rations, remaining mostly silent. As night approached, Nelren took the first watch. Thaelen laid in his bedroll, watching as the stars, one by one, began to light up, adding their light to Vania's soft glow. He had a hard time falling asleep, his mind wandering to the cell, and what could have happened. Taela lay next to him in her own bedroll, her breath slow and calm. He thought back to their first night together. A smile spread across his face. He laid there looking at her fast asleep. Yet sleep escaped him. The minutes dragged on. The only sounds were the wind, the campfire, and the crickets playing in the night. His eyelids grew heavy, and he yawned silently. As he gazed into the shadows beneath the trees, he thought that he saw a glimpse of something some distance away. As his now tired eyes focused on the darkness beyond the fire's flickering glow, he thought he saw a tall figure standing in the shadow. It seemed humanoid. Its head was akin to a stag's skull, antlers on either side. He could not see much else, but thought that he could see a pair of white eyes. It stood still, unmoving, observing.
Thaelen blinked, trying to get his tired eyes to focus. But the moment he opened them again, the figure was gone. He was now wide awake, and though tired, he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. It was the small hours he guessed on Anaea's position in the sky. He must have dozed off, as she had moved considerably compared to before. What he had seen was unnerving, even if it had just been a dream. He rose to a sitting position and rubbed his eyes. "You should be sleeping," Nelren said. "I can't," Thaelen responded. I thought I saw something. But it was just a dream." "What did you see?" "A tall figure with antlers," he answered, glimpsing at the old stone. "A silly loon," Nelren said musingly. Thaelen gazed back into the night. He shuddered. "Maybe we should go, if it is a tree spirit." "Tch, they're just an old legend," Nelren said. Thaelen didn't press it. The campfire cracked and popped as Nelren fed it another twig. "It's well past your watch," Thaelen said. "You should get some sleep, if nothing else, to be able to handle Taela tomorrow." He caught a slight smirk from Nelren. "Perhaps you're right." There was a loud snap from the south. They looked over, gazing into the night. As Nelren squinted into the gloom, he spotted people, crossbows in hand. "Shit," he said, rising to his feet and drawing his long sword. At that moment, several crossbow bolts came flying from the dark, and Daeron's soldiers rushed into the fire's light. Swords drawn. Taela and Anaea were roused from their sleep at the sudden activity. Before any of them could react properly, one of the soldiers was on Nelren, who parried the attacker's thrust. He followed it up with a jab of his own, but the assailant dodged out of the way. Thaelen flung a firebolt at a soldier that rushed towards him, who flinched at the sudden flames but still pressed forward. Taela and Anaea were scrambling out of the bedrolls as more assailants were coming out of the forest. Taela was swift up on her feet, and just in time as one assailant sought to stab her with a sword. The blade was stopped by an invisible barrier swiftly conjured by her. She scowled at him and drew upon her magic. Her assailant was flung into a tree as she raised her hands. She then sought to conjure a more proper barrier, but a sharp pain stopped her. A crossbow bolt had lodged itself into her leg, and with it came not just physical pain, but also
the numbing pain of dark iron.
She fell to her knees,
stunned by its effect and the sharp pain.
Anaea pressed herself against a tree. She didn't know what to do. She had never fought in her life, nor did she have any experience with combat.
It was all so hectic, so chaotic. She didn't notice the man that came towards her from the side.
He grabbed her, pulling her away from the camp.
"Nelren!" she yelled. He glanced in her direction. He gritted his teeth and parried yet another attack from his opponent. He had to find an opening. Anaea struggled as she was pulled into the forest, but to no avail. He was too strong.
But then there came a cry from the soldier, and he let go of his grip.
As Anaea gazed at her assailant, she saw that something sharp had embedded itself into his shoulder. It was not a blade, nor bolt, nor arrow, but eyes. She gazed back, locking eyes with Thaelen. He gave her a nod,
but swiftly had to return to the fray when a large dog came upon him. She pulled herself back towards the campfire, but remained crouched near a bush.
Nelren kicked the knee of the attacker. He had to help his sister. But before he could rush to where she had been pulled to, there came another assailant. He parried the attack,
Did a feigned swing, then drove the blade through the man's throat.
With a jank, he pulled the blade loose. He gazed about. There must have been at least 7 now, all determined to either kill or capture them. Thaelen seemed haggard, and Taela was on the ground, a crossbow bolt in her leg.
He could not see Anaea anywhere.
Well, well, look who it is, eh? Nelren turned to face the speaker.
Melric,
He said, frowning.
Nelren, the protege of Gelder, captain of the guard.
Now nothing more than a traitor. The man taunted.
And you, Melric, taking your chance to earn a little credit for the country guards?
Should have expected as such from a Daerol. You will face death here or in the hand of the hangman. I don't care which one it... They froze. All fell silent at the sound. Not even the forest made a noise. Only the crack and pop of the fire was heard. There was no wind, and no cricket played. The sound came again, closer this time. It was like a roar, yet also like a voice.
The trees about them began to move, swaying without wind, their creaking groans answering the caller.
Silent! Retreat! Melric yelled. He turned and ran towards the trees, but before leaving the light of the fire,
he turned to face Nelren. Do not think this is over, traitor.
The soldiers disengaged and fell back into the shadows of the night. Where is Anaea? Nelren asked after some time.
I'm here,
she said, coming out from her hiding place. She seemed almost stunned, her face pale.
Thanks to Thaelen.
Nelren nodded. Blood coated his sword, as well as his gambeson. He had a small cut on his face, near the scar. Remain near the fire, he said. I'm going to check for stragglers. And this creature. He went out into the forest, leaving the others behind.
What was that sound?
Anaea asked. Her eyes turned to the stone. Its tear-shaped form seemed to almost morph and twist in the light of the flickering fire.
He said Silent Loon. Could it really be a tree spirit?
I did see something beneath the trees, Thaelen said.
Just before we were attacked. I thought it was a dream. If it is a tree spirit, then we should not linger here for long.
Taela grunted from her injury, holding her leg. Realizing that Taela was hurt, Thaelen swiftly moved to her and knelt down.
Thaelen,
she said through gritted teeth. Nelren returned to the campsite and went over to her as well. His face was neutral, though a hint of concern could be seen in his eyes. He bent down and grabbed the bolt. This is going to hurt. Taela looked at him, gave him a nod, and closed her eyes. With a single yank, he pulled it out. Taela muffled a scream. Her breath was swift and jagged. Blood poured from the wound, a fast trickle of red. Thaelen put his hand over it and spoke, almost chanting. As he spoke, the trickle of blood ceased, and the wound began to close, the skin knitting itself back together. When he removed his hand, all that could be seen was a mark, like a bruise.
You all right?
He asked.
It hurts a little. But I will be fine,
she answered, nodding. He smiled and helped her to her feet. She was shaking a little, but was otherwise seemingly all right.
I'd heard of what magic could do,
Anaea said, somewhat in disbelief.
but didn't believe it could be done. That was a relatively simple wound to mend. Some things are much harder, even impossible to heal. Even still, at best that injury would have made her incapable of walking for a while. And yet here she stands.
Taela gave a slight smile, then gazed around the campsite. 2 Daerien soldiers lay dead, as well as a large dog. Nelren walked up to one of the dead men, the Daerien emblem upon the man's chest coated with blood. He knelt and spoke.
Hivile, Dorn fal Daeria.
For a while none said anything. Then Thaelen spoke.
Did you see anything?
He asked, turning to Nelren, who shook his head.
Nothing. No stragglers. And no Silent Loon. They will return,
Taela said.
We must go. Are you certain you can walk?
Nelren asked, still kneeling before the dead man. She nodded. There was a slight pain in her leg, but it had already mostly subsided.
I'll be fine.
They packed up everything in a hurry, occasionally casting an eye into the darkness. They doused the fire and headed into the shadows neath the trees. They lit no lantern and travelled only by the faint light of Anaea. Their going was slowed by the terrain. Iliva rose as they went, but her light did not raise their spirits. Nelren did not speak at all. He simply led them through the forest. He did not speak for the rest of the day.